Netflix's hit dramedy Boots is based on the best-selling memoir The Pink Marine by Greg Cope White, but it does take some creative liberties for the sake of better storytelling and more meaningful character arcs. Rather than being a work of fiction, Boots is based on a real story. Greg Cope White, who is renamed Cam Cope in Boots, joins the Marines in a time when it's illegal to be gay in the military. The story balances the fear of being outed with the need for identity and the drive to succeed. With Cope White leading the writer's room, it's no surprise that Boots does an incredible job of translating the story for a new audience. Additionally, it incorporates the same wit and cynicism that shaped the Pink Marine's tone, plus a stellar soundtrack that's a love letter to queer 80s music. That being said, the creative team made some changes to the story. Netflix's Boots takes place in 1990 instead of 1979. Hicks offers poisonous alcohol to Slovacek, Cam, Cody, and Nash in Boots Episode 6. Patty Pay and Netflix. One of the most significant changes that Netflix's Boots makes to the true story is changing the time frame. In real life, Greg Cope White enlisted in the Marines in 1979. However, Boots takes place in 1990 instead, which is a significant change that strengthens the storyline. While it was unquestionably illegal to be gay when Cope White joined in 1979, he enlisted before the infamous 1981 declaration that homosexuality is incompatible with military service. That was a turning point in the witch hunts for lesbian, gay, and bisexual service members. Additionally, in 1990, more people were questioning whether the ban was reasonable. As such, Cam, Jones, and Sergeant Sullivan would have more people on their side in 1990 than in 1979. The real Cameron had more sexual experience before boot camp. Miles he eyes as Cam looking curiously with a black eye and holding his rifle in the forest in Boots. Both the book and Netflix's Boots make a point out of Greg and Cam's experience or lack thereof. Cam is a virgin in Boots, and he's so innocent that he doesn't even know what lube is. This detail shows just how far into the closet he is, and how young and innocent he is. However, Cope White writes in his book that he had sexual experiences with both men and women, disliking sex with women, before going into the Marine Corps. He's also about a year and a half older than his fictional counterpart, making him much more knowledgeable. Bowman didn't have a twin and failed out of the platoon sooner. John Bowman looks upset at his brother Cody Bowman in Boots Episode 2. Courtesy of Netflix. The twin brothers Cody and John Bowman are among the most interesting supporting characters in Boots, revealing some of the dark sides of growing up as military brats. They are held to rigid standards in a hyper-competitive environment, drenched in toxic masculinity, where they are pitted against each other. They also have opposite personalities. However, in real life, Bowman is one character rather than a pair of twins. Additionally, he fails out of his first platoon, like in Boots, except it happens during the pull-ups. By keeping John Bowman around a little longer, it hurts more when he is separated from his new friend, Cam. The real Cam Cope cheated his way into the Marines. Cam Cope looks straight at the camera and holds up his rifle in Netflix's Boots. Courtesy of Netflix. At the end of Boots, Sergeant Sullivan recounts a story to Cam about how he got into the Marine Corporation. He was underweight, which would have prevented him from enlisting. However, his recruiter helped him by taping a piece of metal to his leg to make him eligible. This moving story actually happened to Greg Cope White, not the counterpart of Sergeant Sullivan. He was a few pounds underweight, which meant he couldn't be a Marine. Luckily, Dale's dad and the recruiter show him empathy. They help him enlist by jerry-rigging a weight for his leg and overlooking the half-pound he's still underweight with the metal. The real Sergeant Sullivan wasn't under investigation in the Pink Marines. Sergeant Sullivan sits on a log next to a bonfire in Boots Episode 3. Alfonso, Pompo, Bresciani in Netflix. Cameron and Sergeant Sullivan are foils of each other in many ways, with the latter serving as inspiration for the former. Cameron is skinny and awkward, while Sergeant Sullivan is strong and confident. However, one similarity they share is the fact that they are both gay during a time when it's a crime. The character of Sergeant Sullivan is for sure based on Sergeant Santoro from the book, considering the show lifts Sullivan's lines almost word for word from Santoro. However, he is not, at least based on what's mentioned in the book, gay. Additionally, he isn't ever shown to be under investigation. However, the parallels between Cam and Sullivan are part of what makes the story so poignant. As such, this is one of the best changes Boots made to the Pink Marines. Nobody in Cam's platoon died during boot camp. Jonathan Nieves as Ochoa looking sadly at someone in Boots. Ochoa's story in Netflix's Boots is pretty tragic. He loves his wife more than anything, so his pain feels palpable when he discovers she's cheating on him. This leads to a scene where he loses his cool and starts unraveling. Unfortunately, Ochoa dies from a heart condition while having a breakdown during incentivized physical training. In the Pink Marine, none of the recruits from Greg's platoon dies during boot camp. Some flunk out. However, they all remain alive. Ultimately, this change helps increase the drama of the show. What's more, it shows how the incentivized PT of boot camp can be cruel and harmful. Cam's mother knew he was going to the Marines ahead of time in real life. Vera Farmiga as Barb in episode 101 of Boots. Alfonso Pompo Bresciani in Netflix. In Boots, Cam tells his mother that he's going to boot camp, but she pays so little attention that she tells him to come back with milk. She then reacts in shock when she gets his phone call and letter, confirming he arrived at his location. This is a change from the Pink Marine, which explains that Greg Cope White informed his entire family that he was going to boot camp. They tried to convince him not to enlist, but he decided to go anyway. That being said, they maintained contact through letters while Cope White was in training. Jones and his storyline don't exist in the book. Jack K's Jones smiling and standing in front of the bunk in Boots. When Jones joins Cam's platoon, it creates an exciting possibility for him, a real-life crush on a gay man. The two bond over their shared experiences in boot camp and the homoerotic undertones of their training. However, Sergeant Sullivan drives a wedge between them, thinking that Cam should learn not to trust anyone. Then, during the Crucible, he goes missing in the swampy area surrounding Paris Island because of his sleepwalking condition. Sergeant Sullivan and Cam work together to save him. Ultimately, none of this happens in the Pink Marine. Jones doesn't exist. Cam doesn't bond with another gay man. A recruit doesn't go missing in the swamp. Cam got his military job and a promotion before graduating boot camp. Cam stands at attention with his fellow recruits in Boots episode 1. Alfonso Pompo Bresciani in Netflix. One of the biggest changes to the Pink Marine is the removal of a very mundane scene at the end of the book where the recruits got their new specialties within the Marines, and a few people were promoted. Greg Cope White became a communications specialist after the events of Boots, an assignment he received before graduation.